Don't want to foul. Shannon from the corner, and it's over. Gonzaga, the flipper still fits.
Russell takes the snap, drops back. He's going to throw down the middle. He's got a man. The ball is caught.
Game over, baby.
Touchdown. The game is over. The Seahawks are going back to the Super Bowl in Glendale. What a catch in the end zone. It is cursed.
And welcome back to the third rendition of The Locker Room. We are getting closer to normalcy, and whatever that even means. I think a lot of us just want some sort of live sports, and that's actually why I'm wearing the jersey. Last week, or over the last week, my English soccer team Manchester City, has played twice, and it's been awesome. Like I love soccer, I love watching it, but it just had a little bit different feel to it.
Where's the Man City origin in your fandom?
In my fandom,
from?
so I play FIFA, the video game,
right?
And the first time I played it was FIFA 10, and I liked their jerseys. I thought they were interesting. Blue's my favorite color, and I was like, Manchester's a cool city in London.
Yeah.
In England, and it's not like London. And I was like, well, I'm going to be a little bit different. I'm going to support a team. And then they were bought out by oil billionaires, and they pumped a bunch of money in the team. Now they're really good, so it actually worked out really well. But, so that was nice. It's nice getting back to a little bit of normalcy. And being able to watch without fan noise, being able to watch with artificial fan noise through it, which actually they're using FIFA.
Talk a little bit about the difference in what you did and did not like as a fan.
It was, so I did it, so I watched one half with no sound, just like with the players, the coaches yelling and screaming. The second half I watched with sound, just to see the difference. But they do a pretty good job. There's actually an audio guy. The specific job is to... They have like a soundboard with like 20 different buttons on it, and each one corresponds to something that's happening on the field. So goals scored, there's an argument, there's a bad foul, all sorts of stuff. There's chance, the team chance that they do. They do a pretty good job making it sound realistic, but I actually liked having no sound. Being able to hear the highest quality athletes at the top of their game yelling and screaming for passes, the managers yelling and screaming at their players to do something. It gives a different perspective, something almost like you're sitting there. And
there's definitely an insight. Well, I'm wondering how it's going to work in the NBA too, because you don't have the fans and the crowd noise to drown out everything that's happening during a timeout break, and the coaches are going over, the plays coming out of, the pass and everything.
And there's definitely going to be some swear words, I feel like, that are going to be flying.
To say the least,
these networks are going to have to account for.
Wait, professional athletes swear on the court, on the field? What?
No, they're very nice and respectful always. Yeah,
well, they got to be, right?
Of course. That what makes them so good, right? Such good role models always.
Yeah, exactly. Model citizens.
Exactly. So that was one nice thing to get back to normalcy. And then we actually had some local sports news. The Zags, during the recruitment process of transfers, they got the second overall transfer that has to sit out for a year. So he's going to sit out this next season. His name is Andrew Nebhard. He will be a redshirt junior when he steps on the court for the Zags in 2021. So he'll sit out this year. He's going to be practicing with the team. He can practice. He can do whatever, but he can't play. So he was the second overall prospect that had to sit out a year. He was all SEC as a freshman for Florida. Had a decent year last year. I think he averaged almost 12 points a game, 6 assists, 3 rebounds. He's a 6'5" point guard. But he's going to be able to sit behind Jalen Suggs, Joel Ayayi, practice against them, learn the system. The last time the Zags had a guard come in and sat out a year was with Nigel Williams-Goss, and we obviously know how well that turned out. So that's going to be really exciting to see what happens. I think it just really goes to show that and so to kind of go back on this, he was also looking to go to Duke, Memphis, Georgetown. Obviously, Duke has their history. He was highly
sought after.
A lot of teams wanted him. He's a guy who he runs the point well. It's almost 6 assists a game. He plays in a good conference in the SEC. He has the size. He's a little skinny, but after a year being a redshirt, he's really going to look good, I think, on that court.
In college, being skinny doesn't matter as much as it would if he's trying to get to the pros. But yeah, I think he'll be fine with his size.
He's going to be he'll start essentially in 2021. He will be the guy in 2021. and he'll probably stay both years unless he goes wild like Nigel did. Because a lot of people expected Goss to stay both years. He ended up only staying the one because he was a stud, and he was like, this is my chance to get drafted. I'm already a little older because I had to sit out a year, and so I think it was time for him to go, unfortunately. But that's really exciting, and it really just goes back to the Zags are becoming one of those teams that guys want to play for, either right out of high school or, since 2000, transfers have actually made up almost a quarter of their roster, which I haven't looked at other teams and to see how that stacks up, but I would have to guess is pretty high in terms of the amount of guys who are transfers. But they're becoming this program that is not quite blue blood because they don't have the history of the Duke, the Kansas, Kentuckys, North Carolinas, but of the last 20 years, they have probably been one of the more successful. I mean, you look at Mark Few's winning percentage, and all they do is win. And so getting guys to come here who are being recruited by other top teams, and again, you look at Jalen Suggs, getting a top 5 player in the country to come to Spokane, Washington. Outside of their basketball, Spokane isn't that special when it comes to a guy who wants to come to play basketball here. It's not like
shots
California.
at Spokane. It's fine. Not that special.
And Spokane's great, but it's you look at it, Duke and North Carolina, neither of those programs have like super cool place to live. But you go to Florida, you go to anywhere in California. I mean, you have the weather, you have the beaches, you have the nightlife, you have the spotlight. And Spokane, being on the West Coast, being specifically in the Northwest, doesn't get the same sort of spotlight as some of these East Coast teams. So that was big news. That'll be really exciting to see what he's able to do. Seems like a good guy. GU only really brings in good guys anyway who really want to be here. They want to be Zags. So we'll see how that ends up playing out. But sticking in the basketball vein, the NBA this is their last day for players to say yay or nay, or I'm going to play in Orlando. It's getting down to that wire where there's a couple guys who've already said, nope, not interested, or nope, I have a son to look after.
Yeah, with the deadline being today, we're recording this on a Wednesday, the 24th. I'm surprised that there haven't been more players that have come out and said that they're not going. So the big 3 that have come out so far, one with the Wizards is Davis Bertans, and he's doing it for contract reasons because he'll finally get his first crack at a completely new contract and doesn't want to risk anything. And what's the likelihood that the Wizards are even going to be able to
not great.
Yeah,
they're bad.
Creep up and try to lobby for the 8th spot with Orlando, who's currently sitting there. So why risk it? It makes sense. It's not surprising. There are going to be a handful of players that are in similar positions that Bertans is. Someone like a Montrezl Harrell. I'll be interested to see if more people come out. You would assume by today to notify their teams that they're not going to go to the bubble. Obviously, Avery Bradley has been in the news a lot recently, kind of with Kyrie and their talks about sitting out and whether their voices would be better utilized in the country, not going and isolating in the bubble in Orlando.
And Kyrie's kind of funny because, he's talking, everyone's like, wow, he's going to sit out like to advance his movement. It's like, well,
he's not even allowed to go in the first place, and I don't think he knew that to begin with, and they told him that, and then, everything's played out the way it has. But Avery Bradley is going to sit out, and then Trevor Ariza is the other big one for the Trailblazers, saying that he's going to sit out, but those are for a little bit more personal of matters.
It's something to do with the fact that he has, visitation rights with his son.
Yeah, I think he's in a custody battle, so I guess I can't blame him.
That would be interesting to watch to see exactly what transpires with that, because that's a very, and being a someone who's in the spotlight, being an athlete, we're going to figure out exactly all the details of that. Unfortunately, because it's always one of those things that you just don't really care about, but you definitely end up figuring out at the end. So that one is interesting. It's unfortunate for the Blazers because he's a decent component to that team.
The 3-and-D guy, one of the OG 3-and-D guys. But what's most interesting out of these 3 names is the fact that Avery Bradley will not be playing for the Lakers. So that opens up a substitute spot that these teams are allowed to look at free agents to bring on the teams in case their players or their starters test positive for COVID, which is going to happen. We're already seeing happen. But that does open the door
bring
for
him
one
back.
J.R. Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Already have Dion Waiters on the team. You might as well continue to spice up the locker room.
Yeah, that's what they needed for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure LeBron's been away from JR too long, and he's like, man, I miss that guy.
I miss him not passing me the ball.
Right.
Like, that's that's interesting. J.R. Smith is also one of those guys who has had a decent NBA career. I mean, he's been a guy who's really wanted throughout the league.
Yeah.
Not so much, obviously, he was a free agent, but over the last 5 years, he's been a decent component on some of these teams. But yeah, he definitely is an interesting guy, a guy who it's always funny hearing how he reacts to things, how he does things, because he's not a top-tier player, so there's definitely mistakes that are made. But he's had his definite fair share of big mistakes. But that will make that Lakers team just that much more interesting to watch, that much more interesting to see if they can keep up their pace. I mean, when this all was shut down, I mean, they had the second best record in the NBA behind the Bucks. And is this the right move? I don't know, because J.R. Smith has the talent in theory. He has sat out the beginning part of the year, but that's going to be one of the bigger storylines, I think, coming back, is in terms of roster construction, because no one else has really made any big moves.
Not
like
big
that.
ones anyway, yeah. I mean, there are still people like Boogie Cousins out there.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's come out and said whether he'd even be open to playing or if he's going to continue to rehab and there's the injury he's coming back from.
I want to say I saw him say no, that he didn't want, or that at least he was leaning toward no.
Sounds right, yeah.
And that would make sense. He's another J.R. Smith kind of guy who, at his peak, he was really, really good, but he's also very quickly gone downhill.
Yeah.
But a guy who could be very useful to a team that wants to make a push and who fits. So I think that kind of would be important for some of these top contending teams who could possibly make a run at this.
Well, and let's look at it. Okay, so we got to figure that the two favorites coming out of the East and the West, starting in the East, it's got to be the Bucks. I mean, I don't know. I keep seeing people having these takes that some of these like mid seeds, the 4 and 5s, like the Oklahoma City Thunder or the Miami Heat, like just because that we're going to a bubble and it's a completely new situation, that they might have an easier path. And I'm like, how about the team that just demolished and obliterated everybody? Their point differential per game was 11 and a half points a game. I mean, that's unheard of. That's insane. So Milwaukee in the East, and then it's got to be the Lakers in the West that have
what a matchup that would be.
Yeah.
That's been the collision course the entire time. Everyone was expecting it to be Lakers, Bucks in the finals. Giannis, LeBron, that sort of, Giannis is probably the next top player in the NBA who's going to hold that crown for a while.
Yeah.
He's going up to his peak, and LeBron's probably at this point going down from his peak.
He's coming down, but he's still incredible.
Is arguably the top player in the league right now. And so that would be – I hope that happens just in terms of the fans being able to see that. I want to see that because I think it could be even a passing of the torch kind of moment.
It could be.
If Giannis comes out, I doubt this will happen. Let's say Giannis and the Bucks come out and sweep the Lakers in 4 games. I think that really puts into a question, like, is Giannis now the face of the NBA? And I think that I think it would be hard to say no at that point.
It is going to push some storylines. But if we're looking at another potential contender, not even potential contender, certainly a contender, is the Clippers. And then we could continue the Kawhi conversation because obviously he's coming off of the championship run last year in Toronto, which seemed unlikely, but it happened. And yeah, maybe they caught a break or two with injuries, but hey, that's how the game goes. It's just a part of it. But yeah, I would not count out the Clippers because it seemed like when the season was brought to a halt, they really kind of were starting to hit their stride. I mean, they'd kind of been up and down all season, but they had started to make a push for it. It seemed like they were finally starting to gel a little bit more.
The second tier behind the Bucks and the Lakers is massive. I mean, you have the Clippers, the Nuggets, the Jazz, sort of the Thunder, but the Rockets, and then on the East you have the Raptors, the Celtics, and sort of the Heat. But yeah, the Raptors and the Celtics are also going to make some noise, I think. The East has been the weakest conference for the last couple of years anyway, just in terms of strength from top to bottom.
Right.
And
1 through 6 this year, though, I feel like is pretty comparable
pretty good,
if you look at what it looks like over in the West. I mean, the 76ers, if they were actually to get their crap figured out and put together and figure out how to play
just trust
with
the process. Trust the process.
How could you do anything else? Yeah. I mean, if they're able to figure it out with Simmons and Embiid, which they have not shown anything in the past that would lead you to believe that they could, but who knows? I mean,
they could all click at one point.
Exactly.
I mean, they have talent. They have the ability. They just haven't been able to figure out the right way to put it all together. And
And if the seeding remains the same, they'd be playing Boston in the first round. I honestly think that they match up pretty favorably against Boston. I don't think Boston has somebody to throw out there to defend Embiid, assuming that Embiid is going to be playing at the peak of his powers, which, he doesn't always do.
Nope.
It'll be interesting to see, too, across the league, what players come in noticeably out of shape or noticeably in better shape. We've heard rumors that James Harden has been losing weight and is the most fit he's ever been. I don't really know about Embiid, but he's always one that is really struggling to get up and down the court an entire game. Nikola Jokic has slimmed down. However, he's one of the players that's come out and already tested positive for the coronavirus. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out and if he's able to get back on the court when the playoffs actually start.
The Rockets are an interesting team to me because they have star power, both with Harden and Westbrook. But at the same time, we were talking before the show, their big is PJ Tucker. And you look also at both Westbrook and Harden, both of those guys, while physical in their own rights, can be bumped around and knocked off their game, I don't want to really compare the two, but the best way, we talked about that Jordan documentary the first show.
Yeah.
And James Harden's in the same vein in the sense that if you just knock him around a little bit, he gets flustered, he gets frustrated, and I think honestly you look at any of the top guys in the NBA, that's the best way to go about it. LeBron's the same way. He's harder to knock around because he's so big, but he's the kind of guy too that you knock him around and really fluster him, he gets frustrated. He starts looking at the officials. He starts looking at the rest of his team, and that's where you start seeing him put his hands up, put his hands to his head. And I think that's their hardest part is dealing with that physicality because they came in, they're the 6th right now in the West. They should be better than that. They should be just purely based off of their star talent. I think Harden and Westbrook should be able to carry that team to at least a better finish than 6 if we just go off of the seeding, but. It's so hard when you're small.
Two things, in my opinion, that don't exactly bode well for the Rockets in terms of functioning in the playoffs is one, kind of piggybacking off of what you were just saying with Harden. Also, the officiating changes in the playoffs, and he absolutely just monopolizes the officials during the regular season. And for me personally, it's unbearable to watch. I hate it.
Tough,
He's really good at it, and I understand why he does it, and it makes sense to, but hard watch. Anyway, so that changes, and he gets really, disheartened during the playoffs because it's not called the same way. He's not getting the calls that he's accustomed to like he does in the regular season. And 2, their size when they committed to going, midway through the season, just completely small ball. It kind of took the league by storm, and it was surprisingly effective for the first few games. When the season had ended, they were not playing well, though. Teams were able to adjust. And in the playoffs, when you're going against a team for 5, 6, 7 games, they're going to be able to figure you out. And Houston doesn't look like they're in any position to make counter adjustments to the opposing teams. I mean, they don't have the bench to do it. Yeah, so they're an interesting team. They're a polarizing team for sure. They could make some noise, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I saw something interesting on Twitter yesterday, actually. I guess this was reported back in December, but either I missed it or I just didn't care because it was December. But I know it was the middle of the NFL season or the end of the NFL season. But the Football Outsiders, they have their big stats, the DVOA, which stands for Defense Adjusted Value Over Average, in case you were curious. I don't even know what that means even, but essentially...
It's one of the preferred stats. Apparently it holds up better than some of the other ones that are out there.
It's like war in baseball. It's like, it's kind of the benchmark for teams if you want good DVOA, and they released their top teams of the decade in terms of overall DVOA, and the top 5 had 3 Seattle teams in it. And not super surprising because they were, and I even tweeted, I was like, the Seahawks were this close to a dynasty. I mean, you look at how dominant they were. That one other Super Bowl title would have put them on that pedestal. And I think there's a lot of people in the media and obviously Seahawks fans that are going to remember and recognize that success. But there's a lot of fans of other NFL teams that are going to look back and be like, they had one title over 10 years. They had, they lost another Super Bowl. They've had some problems, and it is unfortunate because, I mean, they were just dominant. They were the dominant team of the decade. The Patriots probably had the early years, the 10, 11, probably 12, but Seattle from 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 probably were definitely just absolutely dominant.
Well, not to push back on the Seattle thing, but yeah, the Patriots won 3 Super Bowls within the decade.
Yep.
I mean, was it 14, 16, and 18?
That sounds right.
Yeah, so I mean, the fact that the Patriots weren't one of the teams in there, they put the 2010 team in there. What we realized looking at this list was that they're going off of the regular seasons.
Yeah, not their success in terms of their playoffs,
where their season ended.
Literally
and
just their regular 16 games. They evaluate every single play, and it is surprising. I think that just shows you too that the Patriots go to a different level in the playoffs, and I think a lot of that has to do with Brady. Belichick's a great coach, but Brady I think is the one that really put them over the top in the playoffs because it was win or nothing. If they didn't win, it's a failed season. There's a lot of teams. It's playoffs or bust. It's not Super Bowl or bust, and they just want to get to the playoffs. And the Seahawks are one of those teams, and they still are one of those teams that, from 2012 to now, it's Super Bowl or bust. They've had down seasons, they've had rough seasons, but it's still, they have that expectation of Super Bowl or bust. There's a lot of teams out there that have been good, not great. Like the Rams are probably a good example. Like right now, it's probably playoffs or bust. They just haven't looked that impressive. And
they got to bounce back from last year too after having that Super Bowl hangover, or at least what it looked like, because they did not play well and they just looked like a complete shell of themselves. But
yeah, the poor Cardinals here had 2 of the worst teams of the decade in 2010 and 2018.
They had their run there with Kurt Warner. I guess one of those seasons
right in the middle of
was
that,
before the turn of the decade. But
and then when they brought in Palmer and Bruce Arians, had that team rolling.
And
Cardinals
unfortunately they ran into the Panthers when Cam had his MVP season. Or else they could have been one of the better teams of the decade as well.
It's really interesting, this whole thing, because they break down best offenses, best defenses, best quarterback, best wide receiver, best running back, and you look at some of these things and it's like there's a lot of guys you don't remember had super impressive seasons. I mean, Jordy Nelson was here like number 8. Anquan Boldin I think even made the list, and it's like you just don't think about some of the. Jordy Nelson obviously is on the tail. Or actually, he's retired now.
He's been retired, and Anquan Bolden's been out of the league for a few years, and it's like, wow, all these guys are already a thing of the past.
But they were studs
Absolutely.
from like 10 to 14, and I mean, So that was really interesting to see. I think the Seahawks. That's a good metric just to show that they were that good. One thing that I always think is just a little interesting is now that the NFL is still rolling through, we think it's still going to happen like normal. One thing that's always fun to look at is quarterbacks. Quarterbacks is what runs the league. It's the face of the NFL. It's the face of their franchises.
It's the face of sports.
Exactly.
It's the biggest position in sports, period.
And I think it's the hardest one to play as well.
Absolutely.
On not just the physicality aspect, but the mental side of it as well. I mean, you literally have entire cities and fan bases on your shoulders.
On your shoulders, yeah.
And so if you have a good quarterback, you have a shot. If you have a bad quarterback, your season's done before it even started.
That's the thing. The impact that they have on a team, despite the surrounding roster, is it's unprecedented.
Yeah, it is. And so let's look at here's a little situation for you. You have one drive. You have to go 75 yards. They just kicked a touchback. You have 75 yards.
How about we go 80?
Well, let's go 80. Let's go 80. Let's throw back a couple years. They have to go 80 yards.
Okay.
80 yards. You have one drive. It's Super Bowl. It's a generic offense. They all have the same targets, same weapons, same offensive line. You have one guy that gets you that win. Who is in your top 5? Let's start with number 5.
Well, if we're pushing it back to 80 yards, I guess that takes Brian Hoyer off my list. I gotta adjust here. Okay, so starting at 5, actually, and I had a hard time. I was thinking about all of the quarterbacks in the league and everything, and one person who slipped to the back of our minds because he didn't play last year, Ben Roethlisberger. He's been there before. Okay, Super Bowl 40. It's controversial to say the least. However, he really proved his playoff pedigree in what I think was the 2010 playoffs and hitting San Antonio Holmes because he did just that. It was a game-winning drive. Yeah. So he's got two Super Bowls. Obviously, he's been in the playoffs so many times. He's been there. He hasn't had great success of late. However, if he found himself in a spot with a Super Bowl contending,
No Antonio Browns or Le'Veon Bells?
Yeah, or perhaps other things that may have been addictive for him in his past.
That was fun.
Yeah, but I think Roethlisberger, in terms of the maturity, he's been there before. I think he's someone that I would feel comfortable in the Super Bowl with 80 yards to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that thought. I think we're looking at the new age, and you have Lamar Jackson. I have him at 5. I don't love it. I think some of the issues with him, not so much in one drive, but I think career-wise is just his durability.
Right.
But I think just how dynamic he can be on both the run and the pass. I think that offense is structured really well for him, so that might be some of the problem. But I love what he can do to opposing defenses. I think his ability to run puts him there at the top of his game. Number 4, I have Aaron Rodgers. I think on a generic offense, on an offense that again has a lot of actually targets. If we're looking at generic offense, he actually has targets. Because right now in Green Bay, he has Devontae Adams, and that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I still have him there. I think his mobility, while not where it was 5 years ago, still is sneaky. I think he can pick up. He did against the Seahawks last year. He picked up those 3rd and 7s. He would scramble, couldn't find a guy, and he'd figure out a way to get that first down. And that's again another guy who wants to win at all costs, and he will put his body on the line, even if it means he played with what was it? A partially torn hamstring or something like that.
So you're saying Cam Newton probably doesn't make your list?
No, Cam Newton does not make my list because Aaron Rodgers is the kind of guy who's going to dive
on
a
a football in a Super Bowl. Yeah, might be a
Aaron
good
Rodgers
thing to
would actually
look
all
into.
of my top 5. I'm pretty sure. I think 29 quarterbacks in the league would do that. So. I think So Rodgers, I think I have Rodgers at 4. Who's your
okay?
4th?
So I do have Rodgers. He's one spot in front of. He's my number 3. At number 4, I have Brady, and I have Brady a little bit further back just because. Obviously, if we were going to see him in a Super Bowl situation and setting, it would be with the Bucs, and we've yet to see what that is going to look like. Obviously, we have all the history with him in New England and being able to get it done, but also just seeing him last year, I don't know. I can't get the bad Brady. Not that he was awful, but
he just missed a couple things that he hadn't missed.
Yeah,
ever.
And we understand that the pieces around him on offense were abysmal, and he didn't have much help. But I still need to see Brady being able to chuck it 50 yards down the field to Mike Evans again. And
I kept him off my list. He's probably sitting at 6 to 7.
For him, or for me, it's just the mentality. It's the head for him.
I think that's a big part of it. He just drives his team to be successful. Like we mentioned earlier, playoff Brady is a completely different thing. Yeah. And it's actually pretty impressive what he's been able to do. But he's probably 6 or 7 to me. I put Shaun Watson at 3 for me. I think his ability, we saw it against the Bills last year, his ability to break sacks, his ability to he's also a lot of my guys are mobile. That's the thing for me is
what's what you want in this today's NFL.
And even Big Ben, while he's not mobile, he's a guy who doesn't go down. He's really a really hard guy to go bring down.
Tough.
2, I have Mahomes. I think Mahomes is Mahomes. Ooh. But I put Wilson number 1. And people are going to be like, well, you're a homer, you're a Seahawks fan, you're this, you're that. But Wilson has continuously won games in the fourth quarter overtime. I mean, I think since he came into the league, he's number 1. I think over the last couple of years, I think he's 2 behind. I don't remember who it was, but he's a guy who, again, he's winning at all costs. He's going. I mean, you saw it last year. He dove for first downs. He's going to risk it, and if he might not do that in the regular season unless the game's on the line, but. I'm putting Wilson above Mahomes. Wilson's done it. He's done it a long, long time. He's in the peak of his prime. His escapability is better than Mahomes, I think. I think his peripheral vision, dealing with guys behind him, is a little bit better than Mahomes. I think Mahomes might have I know he has a better arm, but I think his escapability isn't there. He's probably faster. But Mahomes also, I think Wilson would thrive in a lot of offenses. I think Mahomes is really set up well in Kansas City in terms of
if you plug Russell into Kansas City, who knows what would happen if you had Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy running an offense for Russell Wilson and actually letting him cook.
So who are your final two guys?
So my final two are the same two guys. I just have them in a reverse order, and part of that is probably a little recency bias. Obviously, Mahomes coming off of the Super Bowl, but
either way, you're probably going to win.
Yeah.
Once you get down to these top two, I think Wilson, Mahomes are going to be first and second on everybody's list. You're going to win.
Yeah.
The chances of you losing are pretty darn slim.
I mean, in the 3 playoff games in 2019 that Mahomes was in, each one of those games he was down at 1 point, 2 scores, double digits. So. Yeah, I mean, the fact that we've seen him consistently be able to claw his team back after a rough start to a game.
Yep.
And that's all the Seahawks do is get down big and then have to claw back. And you win games in the fourth quarter. There's no way you can possibly win a game by scoring multiple scores in the first and second quarters. Why don't you just wait until the fourth quarter?
Let's just wait. Yeah. Let's just put it all on Wilson in the fourth quarter.
Similar lists for sure. The only big difference is Roethlisberger and then
and
you don't have Brady.
And definitely Brady's right there. And I think Big Ben also is right there. A healthy Big Ben is still a guy who can lead your team to victory and, again, do everything he can to do so. Well, let's move on to the last topic here. Some really exciting news because we talked about this last week. Baseball's back. And it's official. July 1st. They will be here.
Is it official? It's hard to believe it's actually official.
The Players Association voted. The commissioner is on board. So the owners are on board.
Oh, and what they do, they settled on the deal that they had
3 months
initially
ago.
put back in March. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of that is just because you have the union arguing, you have the owners arguing, and eventually it's like, we got to do something. Let's go back and just pick something. Let's pick that one, right?
Yeah.
60 games. And so that's exciting. July 1st is when all the players will report not to their spring training locations, but to their team facilities in their towns.
Correct.
So the Mariners will be in T-Mobile Park, not Safeco, but that's an argument for another time.
Tough.
It's very tough. They'll be back in Seattle next week. They're actually going to utilize their minor league at both in Everett and in Tacoma, so they can keep that distancing because I think they only have a couple batting cages indoors. So there's a couple things they got to do, but games will be happening, I think, on either the 23rd or 24th or 25th of July.
23rd or 24th. They haven't officialized it.
So
but yes.
we're a month away from first pitch. And so that's really exciting. There are a few different things that they have to follow.
There are some interesting rules that are a little contrary to what typical baseball play and some of the etiquette would usually look like.
Done forever. So one thing that's kind of funny is there's no fans, but there was in the Korean Baseball League, they put stuffed animals behind, which is really odd.
I don't think America gets that creative.
I don't think so. I think they would be pretty upset about it. But the big thing is no chew, which already they had to be. You couldn't be on TV. Like you had to be hidden about that. They didn't want their fans. They didn't want kids seeing professionals chew. No seeds. I don't think they probably can have gum either. Would be my guess.
So I don't know if it's that they can't have those things. All I know is that the bottom line is you cannot spit those things out.
Okay, so you'd probably have to.
You're not allowed to spit. Not allowed to.
Yeah, let's see how they enforce that because I feel like you're so set in your ways.
It'll be interesting to see how they are supposed to police that. What do you do? Somebody accidentally,
it goes
it's second nature.
Well, this is the other rule that kind of ties in with that when it comes to suspensions and fines and whatever. But when a player or a manager or whoever wants to come argue balls and strikes with the umpire, you have to be 6 feet away from them because if not, you could actually be suspended, which I think is really odd.
And the first thing at the forefront of your mind when you're pissed off about a call,
you're getting
is,
right.
Hey, I gotta maintain 6 feet away. Obviously, that's going to be the first thing all these people will keep in mind.
It's going to make these arguments a little worse. I think it's going to be a little weird. Like, I mean, you're going to be yelling at someone like this. Like,
I know.
You can't get any closer, and I think that's going to cause.
Are we allowed to rush the mound? Or are there going to be mound rushes this year?
So it's at the mound, they're going to have a 6-foot piece of tape. That's as close as you can get. You can throw stuff at them. You can throw your bats and that kind of stuff.
And they're going to have a wet rag for the pitchers out on the mound because they're not allowed to lick their fingers to get a little bit better grip and spin on the ball.
That's big for these pitchers because in the era of the quote-unquote juiced ball, they are trying to do everything they can to be a little bit better there. The other thing that's interesting, the universal DH, so the designated hitter will be in the National League for the first time. That's going to be really controversial because there's a lot of baseball purists who don't like that.
It's going to be a weird season. You might as well try all these things that have been tossed around in terms of implementing some changes into baseball.
Yep.
The other one being the extra inning rule.
Yep. And so now you can, in the beginning of the 10th inning, they're going to put a guy on second to start, and that's how they're going to try and speed games up. They've been doing that in college, I guess, and that's worked out pretty well.
It's only going to be for the regular season, though. Once they get to the postseason, that's going to be
Exactly. It's going to be normal.
what the normal was.
Yep, and so that will be really interesting. And the other thing I think that would be good to talk about is records, and in terms of how is there going to be asterisks? Is there going to be – because they're talking about guys hitting 400, which I don't think will happen. There's talk about guys having a below 1 ERA. You know, Ubaldo Jimenez did it in 2010. He hit through 60 games. He was 11-1 with a .93 ERA.
That's insane.
It's a different generation still. I mean, that was 10 years ago in the era of the juice ball, in the era of home runs. The chance of having a sub-1 ERA and an over 400 batting average, I think, is slim to none. But it will really – I mean, you might have a guy who wins 7 games be the leader in wins. And you might have a guy who hits 20 home runs be the home run leader. And so that will be my really big thing to watch. It's going to be super fascinating, is watching who gets these stats, who hits these benchmarks. I think it's unfortunate for guys like Miguel Cabrera, who are on their way out, who have numbers they want to hit.
Yeah,
Felix Hernandez, another
right.
great one, too, who's trying to get to a certain amount of wins, a certain amount of strikeouts, who this really sucks for them. I mean, they already are, especially Felix, going super far down. So I'm just excited. Baseball's back one way or the other. We'll be able to see players play. We'll see them back in T-Mobile Park. We'll see the young guys for the Mariners. We'll see baseball in general, which always for me is the perfect summer sport, just to go to a ballpark, sit, and hang out and watch baseball. Except we can't do that, though. So
Nope, we can't.
I'll watch them at home, I guess.
Right.
Well, I'll spit sunflower seeds at home and just live in the good old days.
Yeah, one more note on speaking of asterisk.
Yes.
So perhaps the biggest winners of coronavirus, Houston Astros.
Good
because
point.
Before the pandemic hit the scene and completely monopolized all the airwaves and everything, the hottest topic, what really got the people's blood boiling, was the Houston Astros. And now nobody talks about it. So we'll see if there is, when baseball comes back, if people pick this animosity for them back up.
As the locker room, we will make sure that people remember that, because that was garbage, that what they did. So we will make sure that the rest of the people in America, the rest of MLB, just remembers what happened, because that can't go away. Because I want them – when they moved to the AL West, I was thrilled. I was like, this is the worst team in baseball. We're going to beat up – the Mariners are going to beat up on the Astros every single year, and then all of a sudden, you know, they torch us, and they win championships, and they cheat, and the Astros –
Well, they got caught cheating.
The Mariners don't cheat. Hey, that's
if
one
they
thing.
do, they're really bad at it, or their definition of cheating is losing a lot of games.
Hey, we're tanking every year.
Tanking for
bad draft picks.
We've
had good ones recently, but in general, bad draft picks. But
well, it's been a good start to the season for the Mariners.
It has been a great start. First place in the AL West, first place in baseball. So that will do it for us this week. Like I said, like we talked about, next week, baseball is back. Players report July 1st. So we will see you next week, and we'll probably have more baseball to talk. I think
we can start talking about games. We can start talking about raw numbers.
Anything, like just something. And so we will get back to some sort of normalcy. We're getting there. We're getting really close. But thanks again for watching us, and we will see you back here next week.